Hey, my friend. So I'm a laid back kind of person, right? Of course, I have my quirks and my silly moments like anyone else, but majority of the time, I just like to chill and observe. However, I didn't always live a calm life, right? Most of my early adulthood, my personality and my reality were constantly butting heads. And so today, I want to talk about the steps I took to design a calm life. And more specifically, there are three habits I had to break to make that happen. And so if you're craving more peace, more clarity, and more intention in your life, this is for you. All right. So, first things first, 10 years ago, I started my journey, my minimalism and intentional living journey. And one of the big reasons I decided to fully commit and go down this path was because I wanted to reinvent myself. And, there are different reasons that contribute to why I wanted to reinvent myself, but I'm not going down that rabbit hole today. However, what I will say is that part of that process for me involved creating a calm life for myself. Because for a long time, I felt like I was always trying to keep up with work, with commitments, with responsibilities, with the pressure to do more, to be more, to prove more, right? To fit in. And no matter how productive I was or how well I managed my time or how put together I tried to appear, something always felt off, right? Like I said, my personality and my reality were constantly butting heads. And, here's an example to help paint this picture for you. Whenever friends and family would ask me how I'm doing, my answer on the surface was always, I'm good, right? There was very little backstory, there was no context. It was just surface level. I'm good. But behind the inflection in my voice and the dimly lit smile on my face, there was a whole lot of frustration and overwhelm because my mind was cluttered, my environment was cluttered. The days felt like they were just blending together. And my internal peace, that felt like something I had to earn. And so eventually I hit my breaking point, which was right around the time I decided to walk down this intentional living path, which was right around 10 years ago, like I said. And what I realized was that the problem wasn't my schedule. I understood that some days were going to be more busy than others. Sometimes I was going to have a longer to do list of things to get done. And that was just part of the routine and to be expected. And so I kept digging. And what I realized was that the problem was my habits, the things I was doing every day without even noticing, right? The habits that were quietly stealing my peace and pulling me out of alignment with what I cared about. See, we're all given 24 hours in a day, and how you spend that time shapes your life experiences. You know this just as well as I do. And so I knew that I had to start making some changes that would help me design a life that felt calm, grounded, and true to my values. And so I took a good look at my habits, and there are three in particular that stood out and became the obvious starting point for me. And those are the habits that I decided to break before branching out and focusing on other things. I digress. So let's walk through these habits together. The first habit I had to break was the guilt I felt anytime I prioritized myself or did anything just for me, right? See, I've always been a giving person, and as far back as I can remember, I've always been pretty selfless. And so I was putting everyone else before me. I was saying yes, even when I didn't want to. I was showing up when I felt empty. I was giving so much of myself to my job and my career. I was bringing work home and I was doing all the things I thought I was supposed to do to be a good person, a good friend, a good listener, a great employee, right? I was giving, I was giving, I was giving. And anytime I did decide to take time for myself, I felt guilty in a way, right? And it's hard to explain, but it felt like I had to justify it or that I had to make up for it later, right? And because of that, I learned a lesson the hard way. Prioritizing yourself isn't selfish, it's responsible. Because if I'm not well, emotionally, mentally, physically, if my cup isn't full, then I can't show up for the people I love or the work I care about in meaningful ways, right? And so, top priority for me was breaking this habit of guilt. And the way I decided to do that was starting a new habit of just checking in with myself, asking myself questions like, okay, well, how am I feeling today? What do I need today? Where's my headspace today? Right. And then giving myself permission to follow through on those answers, to make the necessary changes based on those answers, because otherwise, what's the point? Right. I can just continue to allow guilt to get in the way of my peace. right? I've already been doing it for so long, so I can just continue to do that. I can continue to give so much of myself to everyone else and everything else except for myself. But that wasn't something I wanted to continue giving up. It was costing me entirely too much. And I was quite frankly, I was tired of it. And so I had to break this habit of feeling guilty for prioritizing me and my needs. The second habit I had to break was saying yes to everything without really thinking about the cost. And here's what I mean by that. All right. To help you get to know me, like I said, I'm a laid back kind of guy. I like to chill and observe. And sometimes that means I'm quiet. And in past years, my quietness was mistaken as being too nice. And that was because I had really blurry boundaries, right? This kind of goes back to the first habit I talked about. I was always giving so much of myself. So I was responding to every message right away. I was saying yes to, different requests, even if I didn't have the bandwidth for it. Other people's urgency was becoming my responsibility. Every aspect of my life started to feel very cluttered. And honestly, it didn't really feel like this was a bad habit per se, right? It just felt like this is what you do. You be helpful, you be available, you be agreeable. But what I wasn't doing, right? What I wasn't doing was protecting my peace. Like I said, my space was becoming cluttered, my thoughts were scattered, and my time felt like it was always spoken for, right? And in hindsight, when I look back on this from the perspective I have today, the reason why certain aspects of my life were a hot mess was because I welcomed that with open arms. I wasn't setting boundaries to protect my peace. And so I had to learn how to draw clear lines in the sand, right? How to set those boundaries to protect my peace. And I wasn't setting boundaries to, push people out, but it was about creating space for what mattered, right? If my cup isn't full, I can't show up for the people I love. I can't show up for the work I enjoy, the work I care about in meaningful ways. And so I had to learn how to draw a clearer line in the sand. And to be honest with you, this wasn't easy, right? This wasn't easy at all. I had a hard time with, you know, not trying to disappoint people or, I didn't want people to think that I wasn't helpful or that I was selfish. I didn't want people to feel like I didn't care, right? I didn't want to disappoint anyone. And so this took some time, right? And what I did is I took some time to journal and reflect on what aspects of my life, where in my life were these boundaries missing or were they really weak? And how can I start to rebuild them? What actions can I take? What mindset shifts can I create for myself? What things can I declutter? What things can I change about the way I think, about my lifestyle, about my habits? What can I do to start to rebuild some of these boundaries? And what I realized was that the more I let others' demands dictate my time, the less I had to give when it truly mattered, right? And so eventually I built up the confidence to say, you know what? These are my boundaries and that's okay. And, everyone else is just going to have to understand that I have boundaries and I'm going to protect my peace. Now, I'm not perfect. I'd be lying to you if I said that I was. And sometimes, to be honest, this is still a work in progress for me, right? I'm working on this every single day. Like any skill that you develop, you have to continue to work at it to maintain that skill. So I'm not perfect, but I'm miles ahead of where I was. And now I'm protecting my time, right? I'm protecting my environment and I'm protecting my attention because that's what peace requires. All right. And when I do that, that means that I can give more of myself when it matters. I can show up for the people I love, for the work I care about in meaningful ways. The third habit I had to break was constant busyness. And something about me that I didn't realize was that how much of my day was filled with movement, but not meaning. And maybe you're in the same boat, right? Where you're constantly giving so much of yourself to everything and everyone. You're trying to multitask, you're switching between different projects, and between all of this giving and doing, there isn't a moment where you feel present. You just feel like you're busy all the time, right? And for me, this felt like I was stuck on autopilot mode. And again, this is a lesson I learned the hard way. And that is when you spend your days on autopilot, you miss your actual life. And so this is why defaulting to busyness was a habit I had to break. I had to learn how to start defaulting to being present. And I want to share a quick story with you because I often like to draw a connection between ideas. to help you really visualize and understand what I'm explaining. So if you have a few moments, I promise it's relevant. My son is at that age now where he's really starting to show interest in a lot of the childhood games that I enjoyed when I was a kid. Things like dodgeball and Simon Says and I Spy with My Little Eye. But one of his favorites right now is the game Red Light, Green Light. And I don't know about you, but this is definitely one of my favorite childhood games, right? Anytime the person who was playing the traffic light, anytime they would yell green light, I would just take off and run as fast as I could, right? And then when they would yell red light, I'd try to freeze and stop in place, right? I'm sure you can remember how fun that game was, right? I can't be the only one. But see, as I started to grow up and I grew older, I started to treat life the exact same way. I spent so many moments in that green light mentality. Go, 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 give, 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 accomplish this, hustle harder, work harder, bring your work home with you, give so much of yourself to everything and everyone else. Just go, 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 go. But what I had to learn, right? I had to learn how to embrace the red light moments. I had to learn how to slow down, to treat the pauses not as interruptions, but as invitations to reflect, to breathe, to be present, to eat a meal without multitasking, right? To have a conversation without my mind being elsewhere, to go for a walk without thinking about what's coming next. And I'll tell you this, some of the moments, some of my most peaceful moments, especially these last handful of years, have come from not changing my circumstances, right? But they have come from just being present for the life that I already have, right? And when I realized that it was a complete 180 for me, right? I stopped defaulting to busyness and I started defaulting to being present because again, if I can't show up for the people I love or the work I care about in meaningful ways, then why does this matter? Right? I'm trying to design a calm life for myself so I can prioritize the things I care about. And if I care about certain things, that means I have to be present for those things as well. And like I said, that lesson I learned the hard way was when you spend your days on autopilot, you end up missing your actual life. And that was a punch in the chest when I had that realization. And so to recap, these are the three habits I had to break: guilt around prioritizing myself, weak boundaries, and constant busyness. And let me tell you, none of these disappeared overnight. All right. I'm not a magician. If I could, I would. Trust me, but I can't. All right. Instead, it was small changes repeated consistently that led to a calmer and more intentional life. And so if you're serious about this journey yourself, right? If you want to design a calm life of your own, if you want to live with more intention and more clarity and prioritize the things you care about, then I want you to start small, pick one habit and make one shift. But I also want to invite you to check out my community. Inside, we're a group of professionals and creators who are committed to living lives aligned with what we care about so we can show up for the people we love and do the work we care about in meaningful ways. And so if you want that support, if you want that accountability, I'll leave a link in the description below or in the show notes. But beyond that, I do want to reassure you of something. Your peace is worth protecting, my friend. And a calm life is not something you just stumble into. It's something you design. Now, if you want to go further down this path and you need a good reminder that the word no is a positive experience and a complete sentence, then check out this video here where I break down the luxury of doing less. I also share two examples from my life of projects and opportunities that I was presented with that would have brought me more, but I said no for the reasons I explained. Stay true to you, my friend, and I'll see you the next one. Peace.